Hello. I want to talk about a mistake that parents are making. Now, I say mistake because I don't believe that most parents are doing this on purpose. I do believe that there are probably a small number of parents who are sadistic and do it on purpose. But most parents don't probably even realize that they're making this mistake. And I hope to release other videos on this type of problem, and it's specific to food and beverage. So, we as parents have a really tough job. When we buy a car, it comes with a manual. We buy a computer. If it's pre-built, it might come with a manual. If we buy a TV, it's got a manual. If we buy a fan, it's got a manual. If we buy a stove, it's got a manual. If we buy a radiator, it's got a manual. These things all come with manuals, but when a baby pops out, there's no manual. And let's face it, different cultures have different views on how to raise children, sometimes vastly different. Some cultures are extremely permissive. Some cultures are extremely authoritarian. Some cultures will have a very permissive attitude about certain things, but not about others. Some cultures are very focused on health, others are not. And culture is, in my experience in life, the single most powerful societal tool there is. And I say this fully knowing that there are people out there saying, no, religion is more powerful. There are exceptions where religion is more powerful. But on average, when it comes right down to it, culture has the ability to warp a religion. Religion also has the ability to warp a culture. But what you'll notice is that culture is baked in. It's the way a society functions. Now, if there's a society with many different cultures, well, there's a schism there, right? But if you have a unified group of people operating under the same culture and a religion is plopped into it, like the Christians love to do, and the Muslims and certain other groups of religious people like to do, what will happen is, if they adopt that religion, they will adopt it, but they will still maintain within it aspects of the culture that are at odds with the religion that they have accepted. So, I have observed this in the U.S., and I have observed this in Indonesia, where the culture is in some ways incredibly different from America. And in other ways, it's like the Deep South used to be. But that's only part of it because Indonesia is its own melting pot of hundreds of different languages and cultures, and it's very, very complicated there. So my experiences are primarily based on interactions with the Javanese people, but also with Sundanese people and Madurans and Betawi and some other groups as well. So let's get back to the focus here, which is going to be this time around is I'm going to talk about beverages. Look, parents, if you love your children, you need to start learning about food and beverages. And it's not easy because industries are so intent on getting your money that they will lie to you. They will manipulate you visually and verbally. They will hire people to act as shills for them. They will hire PROs, public relations officers, whose job it is to spin things to make the company look innocent when they're actually guilty. They'll hire marketing to manipulate you into believing their product is the best. They will hire even corrupt scientists and doctors to lie to you. And there are many of them on YouTube. YouTube is chock full of these influential doctors, scientists, and non-experts talking about medical issues, nutrition issues, diet issues, and lying flat out to you. They will reference studies and tell you the opposite of what the study says. But most people don't fact check. And sometimes fact checking is not something a person can do because they lack the education or perhaps the native intelligence to understand the study. So they can't say, oh, well, he said don't eat meat, but in the study it says eat meat. Or he said do eat meat, lots and lots of meat. Meat is great for you, but the study says very clearly stay away from meat as much as you can. Eat a little bit per week, only a little bit. Which one is correct? If you don't have, and trust me, as a former educator, I am sickened by what has happened to the American educational system. It has never been great, and it is just going down the tubes. And when I say the tubes, I mean the toilet tubes. Okay? It has gotten to the point where unless you invest time in courses of study that are very analytical and logical, you are an easy target for emotional manipulation. And these journalists, investigative journalists who end up becoming industry shills know that. And the industry chooses people who are very, very convincing, like Gary Taubes and Nina Teicholz. And they will either directly or indirectly fund them so they can spread the false information that will ultimately profit that food sector or beverage sector or the entire industry, as well as other industries, including healthcare, health insurance, surgical care, pharmaceuticals, and many other industries. It's if you think about it, the people who have lots of money and invest them into lots of different industries as a diversification strategy, which is a good thing, because if one industry fails or one company fails, you still have your investments in all those other places that are not related to that industry or company. Unfortunately, once they get that position and they're powerful enough, some of those people will actually manipulate in order to improve even further their investment, and they will do it in an unethical and even illegal way. So, the subject again, and please don't mind me while I have my avocado pudding. Oh. I flavored it with non-dairy caramel. And it's very yummy. Personal shake maker, 2 avocados. Fill it up to about here with your choice of milk substitute. Add in some flavoring of your choice. Could be cinnamon, could be caramel, could be mint. Experiment, because some flavors don't actually work out well with avocado. But this is extremely healthful. It has a lot of mono and polyunsaturated fats. It also has some good saturated fats in it. And this helps to prep your stomach. So if you're going to be having something that has a lot of sugar in it, and unfortunately, my choice for the caramel actually had sugar in it already. But if you're going to be eating sugar sources like starchy fruits and vegetables, bread and stuff like that, then eating something with a lot of fat in it can help get your gut ready and to consume that sugar, but at a slower speed. So it's when the pandemic started, they talked about flattening the curve. Well, things like high fiber products And protein sources and fat sources can do that. And on top of that, if you mix some vinegar into some water or a beverage of your choice and drink that down during the meal, that can also aid your body in the storage of the converted sugar. It's converted into something called glycogen, which is it's just the form of the sugar in your bloodstream. So so simple way to make a delicious shake that is healthful without all the stuff that's going to hurt you. And right, so there are many, 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 many beverages out there that are bad for health, and very few that are good for health. It's sad, but it's true. It's a huge industry. It probably is into the trillions of dollars. So when we talk about those colored drinks that you can make from powder, almost all of those are bad for health. If we talk about sodas, if you're talking about a sugared soda, automatically it's bad for health. Juice boxes, bottles of juice, and so on, if it's pure juice and not the whole fruit blended up, it's bad for health. It's almost as bad as a soda, because despite the fact that it has vitamins and minerals that are good, it has a huge quantity of sugar in it, and that's bad because there's no fiber to help slow down the introduction of that sugar into your blood. So basically, you drink a juice or you drink a soda, the same thing happens. It slams a huge quantity of sugar into your bloodstream. And then your pancreas has to overproduce insulin to try to catch up. So then you go on a roller coaster. So here's the sugar spike way up here. You can't even see it. And then the insulin comes in. It crashes down below the normal level sometimes, especially if you're diabetic. It will crash down below. It will go too high. It will go too low. And you will go from feeling to... So anything that's sugary, whether you have a family history of diabetes or not, is bad for your health. Even if you are one of those people who doesn't get diabetes, it's still messing you up. It's increasing your risks of cancer. It's increasing your risks of heart disease and so many other potential effects that are bad. Just, I want to use bigger words, but I don't want to, I don't want to be too I don't know what the word is. I just don't want to make people confused. I have a big vocabulary, but I'm trying to make sure I try not to make it too complicated, which is hard for me sometimes. So, sodas, those sugary powdered beverages, the pure juice beverages, all that stuff. I don't care if there are people who are losing weight on a juicing regimen. Great. But you're ignoring the fact that you're hurting yourself while you're losing weight. I mean, if that's what you got to do to lose weight, you still have to understand that you're consuming very large quantities of sugar, lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of calories. So you're actually making it harder to lose weight. Number one beverage to drink if you're not exercising a lot is water. Now, let's talk about coffee and tea and products similar to that, like cola. So, now I haven't mentioned the sugar-free sodas yet, because that's a different category, okay? If you're drinking tea with lots of sugar, no, not good. If you're drinking tea with milk, bad. Because the milk and the polyphenols or the antioxidants in the tea bind together. And so those antioxidants are neutralized and inaccessible to your body when you drink that tea. So, yes, I know putting creamer into your tea, especially if you have like a chai, is so delicious. So if you're going to drink a healthful beverage like tea or chai, which is a spiced tea, understand that when you put milk in, you are destroying the healthful benefits of it. It's there for flavor only. So if that's what you want to do, I mean, you can do that, but you're not getting any benefits really. Also, if all you're doing is drinking things like coffee and tea and dark sodas all the time, you're going to end up with kidney stones. This is because there are tannins and things in those beverages that accumulate in the kidneys, and the kidneys will have trouble keeping up. Now, if you get the stones and they pass out of the kidneys, well, you still have to get them through your pee hole, right? Your urethra, and that can be very painful. My ex-brother-in-law, he used to have a very bad tendency of not consuming enough water. And so he would have trouble peeing because he would be passing a kidney stone, and he would have to push really, really hard, which isn't necessarily good for your bladder. Because if you're forcing a kidney stone to come out and you're putting that much pressure on your bladder, there is a potential for damage. Okay, I'm not saying it's a high potential, but there is a potential. Okay, and he would push so hard that when the kidney stone finally was pushed out by the urine, it would go ping and go flying. And he showed me some of them. And there are different kinds. And so I looked at what he showed me. I didn't touch it. I didn't want to touch his kidney stones. But I looked at what he showed me, and I looked it up. And it turned out the kind that he was getting was because he was not hydrating enough. He was not drinking enough water. So I believe, if I remember correctly, and this was years and years and years ago, those were calcium stones. And I told him, look, you just need to drink more water. Drink regularly, drink water. And he did, and it stopped. So, yay, right? But, yeah, so tea, coffee, colas, all those dark beverages can, especially if you're not drinking enough water, cause you to end up with kidney stones. And if the kidney stones cannot be passed out of your kidneys for whatever reason, that means kidney surgery. Now, please understand, the kidneys have very little ability to repair themselves. So internal damage to the kidneys is generally going to be permanent. So I've actually met people who were constant drinkers of tea. They were in the hospital. I was like, why are you here? Kidney stones. Well, why? What happened? I drink tea all the time. And from talking to doctors, apparently this is a common thing in countries where tea is very frequently drunk. So, don't put milk in your tea. Be careful about how much tea you drink if it is one of the caffeinated types. If it's green tea or black tea or any others that have caffeine. Herbal teas generally do not have caffeine in them. But yeah, be careful. If you're buying bubble tea or tapioca pearl tea, it's the same thing. Tapioca is from cassava root, and it is a starch. So that will eventually, like within half an hour or so, break down into a sugar form in your body, in your bloodstream. As far as coffee is concerned, I recently saw a professor who is highly respected, named Professor Tim Spector. He's part of Zoe Science and Nutrition. In one video, he was telling this lady he was interacting with, who is a customer of Zoe, that she should drink 5 cups of coffee a day. And I just about lost my... I was driving, and I just about lost it. And I yelled at him. I said, "What are you talking about? That's stupid." Look, I'm going to teach you a simple trick in a minute or so on how to deal with energy drinks in such a way that you don't become addicted and you don't become resistant to caffeine. But in order to do that, you have to do something. So we'll get to that, okay? So 5 cups of coffee. 1 cup of coffee has approximately 80 milligrams. Now, if you're drinking espresso or something else that was very rapidly produced, it's going to be less than 80 milligrams. So that's a little bit of a way to cheat, to get less caffeine with your coffee flavor. Obviously, if you're using decaf, there's very little to no caffeine in it. But 80 milligrams. So 80 milligrams goes into 5 cups, 80 milligrams times 5, right? That's 400 milligrams in a day. That's like, for some people, that's over the limit for what's safe for them. And there are other people, it might be okay, but I would never suggest to anybody, under any circumstances, to drink anything other than decaf coffee at that level. And the reason he was suggesting it is because coffee does have beneficial components to it, like polyphenols. Very beneficial. But if you're going to be drinking 5 a day, then watch out. Because number one, you're going to become dependent on and addicted to caffeine. Number two, you're going to find yourself over time, if you're drinking it every day like that, you're going to find yourself having to have more and more just to get the same effect. Number three, if you don't drink it every single day, it's going to be difficult at that level for you to ever be to the point where there's no caffeine in your system. Number four, your sleep will be disrupted. I'm not saying you won't be able to sleep necessarily. Now, if you're one of those people like my wife and my kids for whom caffeine is a sedative, where it relaxes you instead of makes you hyper, these rules don't apply. Although you may want to observe, if I have had a lot of coffee in the afternoon or evening, when I get up in the morning, do I feel rested after 8 hours or whatever you find to be the optimum number of hours of sleep is? Or do I feel like I should have slept longer? Or do I feel like the same I feel if I stay up really, really late and then go to bed? Because that screws up your brain. Because your brain is actually cleaning itself when you're sleeping if you go to bed at the same time every night. And it's very, very important for that cleaning regimen to happen. And that's why sometimes you'll wake up in the morning and you'll be like, oh, somebody stuffed cotton in my head. I can't think clearly. You're moving slowly. You're thinking slowly. You're making mistakes. You may not even realize. Then you get in the car in that state. Now you're endangering yourself and other people. So when you hear a professor, and I don't care if he's one of the top quoted or referenced professors in the world, Dr. Tim Spencer and everybody else, nobody should ever, ever, ever say more than 1 to 2 cups of coffee per day. And in fact, in my experience, and I've been doing this for years now, you shouldn't even have coffee or caffeine every day. So let's lead into how to use coffee and energy drinks in order to benefit from the caffeine, but without becoming an addict. So the first thing is you need to establish a consistent sleep schedule. And please, people in management and leadership in your companies, listen very carefully to this. Because if you don't have your team on the same schedule night after night after night, including yourself, you're not superhuman, including yourself, if you don't have them all on the same schedule and you keep on making them change schedules from days to nights to mid-shift and things like that, the end result is going to be they will not perform optimally. They will cost your company money because they will increase the risks of injuries and accidents. They will decrease productivity for themselves and other people. They will introduce errors into designs because they're not thinking clearly, because you have messed with their sleep schedule. So if you are messing with your sleep schedule or messing with other people's sleep schedules, you are actually costing your company money and yourself money. You're putting those people at risk. You're putting people working with them in some sort of situations at risk. You're putting everybody on the road at risk. This has to stop. I work for Amazon, and they shift managers around indiscriminately without any consideration to how well that's going to work out for the person. It takes time for you to reset your circadian rhythm to be able to go to bed at a different time. I do it. It takes how long it takes depends on the person. My suggestion is if you're going to be, you're going to be shifting like 8 hours, then you need to start preparing weeks ahead of time. So every night you go to bed half an hour earlier, until you get to the target bedtime. And then every night you need to go to bed at that target bedtime. Don't stay up late. Now, I understand you want to treat yourself, you want to stay out with your friends and stuff, but you have to understand that there will be consequences for you doing that. The later you stay up past your bedtime, the more likely it is the next day you're going to wake up and you are not going to be functioning right. So in order to use energy drinks, in order to use caffeinated drinks and other caffeine sources correctly, you must have a consistent sleep schedule. And you should avoid varying it because you want to get the optimal benefits of the cleaning process that happens while you are asleep. And if you're constantly varying your sleep schedule, that's just not going to happen. And then you'll need more caffeine to counteract the effects of your neglecting your body, your brain. All right. So it's really, really simple. Get, like I said, a consistent sleep schedule, but also the right number of hours. Now, how much time you need to sleep, it varies from person to person to person. If you really want to understand whether you have gotten enough sleep, this is going to take time, okay? Now, the baseline that people recommend for adults is different from young adults, is different from the elderly, is different from teenagers, is different from tweens, is different from preteens, is different from babies and toddlers. It's all, there's a whole big range, and you need to look at credible medical sources, scientific sources, not those wacko websites that are also selling you sleep supplements like whatever it is you think is going to work to help you sleep, or whatever they say is going to work to help you sleep. And I'm not saying it's not necessarily going to help. Like melatonin, you drink enough of it, or you consume enough of it, you are going to start to become sleepy in many cases, right? Now, I've experimented with using it. The brand that I bought didn't have an effect until I was consuming like 8. And one day I took some anticipating that I was going to be going to bed within the next half hour, and then I didn't go to bed within the next half hour, and I started feeling, and I realized, that's the melatonin. I should get in bed. Okay. So, consistent sleep schedule. Discover the optimum number of hours that you need. Now, again, this is going to take time to establish what is the optimum time frame for sleeping. And there could be some variance as to how much you need. It depends also on how physically active you were. It depends on how healthy you are. It depends on if you have trouble with insomnia. And there are ways to deal with insomnia. Although it differs between people who do have like anxiety and those who don't, between people who do have ADHD or ADD or hyperactivity and those who don't. And so on. So, but what you're going to do is this. You're going to start at, say, 9 hours. Okay? For example, doesn't have to be 9 hours. I'm just giving you a number as a suggestion. You're going to go to bed every night at the same time, and you're going to set your alarm for 9 hours after that. So if that means if you have to get up at 5 o'clock, that means you need to go to bed at 8 o'clock. Go to sleep at 8 o'clock, right? And you're going to do that for 2 to 4 weeks. If by the 4th week you don't notice that it is really helping you, then you're going to step it down half an hour. So for another 2 to 4 weeks, you're going to go to bed and sleep for 8.5 hours. And keep track of the results, because it can get fuzzy in your head over time. You may be able to remember, but eventually your mind is going to play tricks with you, especially if you're not sleeping right. Or you have certain medical issues. You're not going to realize you're making mistakes. So write down the perceived result at the end of that test for that number of hours. If 8.5, then 8.5, go to 8. And then go to 7.5, then go to 7. And keep going until you find an optimal number of hours, but don't do it less than 6. Now, I know this is going to be hard for Muslims especially, because you are required to get up very early in the morning to do your first prayer. But you need to adjust your sleep schedule to accommodate that requirement. Or you need to stop doing that first prayer, which I'm not advocating, because I understand it's a requirement, but you need to make a choice. You either abide by that requirement or you skip that prayer time. It's your choice, not mine. And I'm not advocating that you skip, because I understand that you have that requirement. So, now that you've recorded all these things, you're probably going to have a good idea of approximately how many hours of sleep you need. But how do you know when you got the best results? Well, you can do a series of little tests. So find an activity that you can do, but you find mentally challenging. And hopefully, preferably, one that gives you a score. So it could be a video game. It could be a crossword puzzle. But crossword puzzles are kind of random as to how long it might take somebody to complete one. Find something that you can do with a fair degree of consistency that challenges your intellectual ability, and see how long it takes and see how many mistakes you make. And perform that. Also, perform a simple physical task and a complicated physical task, and evaluate how you feel in your head. Do you feel any dizziness? Do you feel any confusion? Do you feel any slowness? And one more thing that you can do that you'll save until the end when you're doing your evaluation is that read a passage from a book. Not the same passage, but the same book, because the level of English is going to be the same. And record it. At the start of the recording, state the date, state the time, and then read just like one page from the book. Now, if it's a half page because it's the start of a chapter, you may have to read some extra. Or if it's a half page at the end, you may need to just combine that half page from the previous chapter with the half page of the next chapter to form a full chapter. But try to do approximately one full page. Or if you've got a particularly dense book, maybe you're going to have to do less than that. Just, for the sake of not going over time, I guess you could say. And then you can go back when you're awake and you know you're fully functional, you know you're doing well, and you can look at the results for each of the tests, and you can evaluate the recordings and say, wow, 9 hours was the same as 6 hours. Not good. or something like that. I can't say what the result is going to be, only that you will, when you are fully functional, notice, and please don't do this with alcohol and drugs, or the drugs. You will notice a difference in your physical and mental abilities, especially at the beginning of the day. The beginning of the day is cognitively and physically the worst part of the day for most people. So if you can actually spend an hour to 2 hours prior to getting into a car, you're making yourself safer for you and everyone else. Man, oh man, it takes so much time to explain this stuff, and I have a hard time being concise. So I apologize to everybody. Thank you if you're still sticking around for this. So what you want to do now is, now that you have the right number of hours, you're going to get on that sleep schedule, and you're going to use the same sleep schedule, same number of hours, same time to bed for at least a month. And that way your circadian rhythm has been reset. Now, if you're doing a drastic schedule change, you need to change it by half hours over however many days you need to get to the new schedule. And then you need to be on that schedule for probably a month. Everybody's different. Some people will adapt in 2 weeks. Some people will adapt in 6 weeks or whatever. It depends. But when you feel like, wow, I really got a good night's rest last night, that's when you know that you are ready and your body and your mind have adjusted. So now, the good news is you probably won't need caffeine. Yeah, in actuality, just by adjusting and correcting your sleep schedule, and you may have medication that is disrupting your sleep schedule, so you need to discuss that with both your pharmacist and your doctor, because the pharmacist will know some things, but the doctor generally will know more. And if you can find independent sources that are trustworthy, which is very, very hard because the pharmaceutical companies are always trying to sell their products, and they're not particularly always going to be ethical about it. They use monetary and other gifts to influence doctors to sell their products to you. So the old stuff gets pushed to the side, not because it's less effective necessarily, but because they've got new stuff that's still under patent and they can charge an arm and a leg for it. Whereas the old stuff that is slid out from underneath the patent protection can no longer command a high price. So they don't want to sell that anymore. So over time, those drugs disappear from the market because the doctors are influenced to push them out of the mind of the public, which is sad. And they also tell you that every pharmaceutical should be thrown away after 1 year. When the fact of the matter is, there is no possible way that every pharmaceutical in the world expires after 1 year. Literally, that is impossible. Every pharmaceutical will expire at its own rate. Some will last for, like the COVID-19 vaccines, don't last a long time, right? Some will go for years and years, and it's hard to tell. So if you notice a decrease in the efficacy of the medication you're taking, it may be that you've hung on to it for too long. Unfortunately, there are no easy answers that I'm aware of as far as deciding when a medication is actually expired. You can talk to your pharmacist and see if the pharmacist says anything other than the 1 year rule. If they just say the 1 year rule, then you just say politely thank you, but not everything expires at the same time. It's impossible. Chemically, it is impossible for everything to expire at the same time. So, my point here is that some medications are going to physically or mentally or emotionally mess you up. For example, I took citalopram and I had two notable side effects. One of them, which was it notably increased my anxiety. and I have generalized and social anxiety. And the other one was I was unable to ejaculate. Never been a problem for me before. And I was like, what's going on? What's wrong with me? I asked my therapist, and she was a little bit uncomfortable about that. And I warned her ahead of time, I've got a really personal, sensitive topic to ask you about. And she didn't have an answer, and she looked very uncomfortable. And I felt bad about that. But I was asking somebody who's supposed to know. Anyways, I figured it out. It was the escitalopram. And that's, everybody reacts differently to medication. So there may be a medication in your life that is causing you not to sleep well. And you have to investigate that with professionals, pharmacists, doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists, not some quack who's selling you supplements on YouTube. And I would love to name names because there are a bunch of them. And they piss me off because they're manipulating you to make themselves rich. They're taking advantage of you, lying to you deliberately to get rich. But I digress for the billionth time in this video. Don't get me started. All right. So, having the sleep schedule figured out and having eliminated medications that are going to disrupt your ability to sleep well, hopefully you did that before you proceed with the sleep testing, eliminate medications that are going to disrupt your sleep. Replace them with things that are safe. Now we can actually get to the beverages. Okay? Rule number 1, never drink more than 1 to 2 cups worth of caffeine. So 80 to 160 milligrams. The reason for this is, depending on the source, there are lots of different sources that give wildly different time frames. But I'm going to go with the 12-hour rule that I have seen, which says that in 12 hours, 1/4 of the caffeine you consumed is still in your body. So that means if you drink 300 milligrams at noon, by midnight, you still have 75 milligrams or a cup of coffee in your body when you want to sleep. And that is going to make you not sleep well. So if you are one of those people who is excited by caffeine, you need it to stay awake, to stay functional, to clear your head. Do not drink anywhere near your bedtime. And when I say anywhere near, I mean cut off your caffeine consumption at least 12 hours, if you can, prior to your bedtime. That means that by the time you get to bedtime, the amount of caffeine, hopefully, unless you're being stupid and drinking too much or consuming too much caffeine, will be so low that it won't really bother you. Preferably, okay, this is important, very, very important. Preferably, you only use caffeine at the start of the day. And that means you're awake for, say, 16 hours. So that means that by the time you go to bed 16 hours after you've had that caffeine, or maybe 15 hours, there's almost no caffeine left in your system. Okay? And that will guarantee you'll have a much better sleep. More resting, and wake up feeling, oh, wow, I see things a little bit differently today. I don't have any cotton in my head. My body isn't betraying me. I'm not feeling overly numb or overly emotional. So stick to 1 to 2 cups worth of coffee, or 80 to 160 milligrams. If you buy a beverage that comes in a can, and I'm not going to show you which one this is, that has caffeine, an energy drink, or a tea, or a coffee, always look for the caffeine information. If it says it's an energy drink and it doesn't tell you how much caffeine is in it, you should be very suspicious. If it does, divide 80 into it and see how many days that beverage is going to last you. Because, and this is true, to quote John Oliver, you're going to drink 1 to 2 cups worth of that energy drink. So if it's got 320 milligrams of caffeine, 8, 16, 24, 32. You're going to be drinking that for over 4 days. Now, I'm not saying 4 consecutive days. You may skip after the first day. You may skip until 3 days later when you need it again. Because if you are no longer consuming medications that mess you up, no longer consuming medications that make it hard for you to sleep, no longer on a fluctuating sleep schedule, you're sleeping the right number of hours, most days you will wake up feeling refreshed and ready to go. Now, if that doesn't happen to you, then you should talk to your doctor. But for a lot of people, this is what's going to happen. So if you wake up on a particular day and you feel fully rested, you feel like you're functioning well, then you don't need to drink the caffeine. And you should not drink the caffeine. Why? Because if you drink caffeine every day, you will become addicted to it. Even though it's 80 milligrams a day, you will become dependent on it. And when you try to stop, your body's going to be like, I hate you. Why are you messing with me? And it's going to make you feel miserable. You'll go through DTs or whatever it's called for caffeine. You'll go through the detoxification symptoms that suck. You will feel like you're, I've not experienced it because I've never allowed myself to be addicted to caffeine, that I'm aware of anyways. But it's very simple. That's all you have to do. So you drink it on the days you need it. You don't drink it on the days you don't. You limit yourself to a maximum of 160 milligrams. If you buy a canned energy drink, and I would suggest for your safety that you buy unsweetened energy drinks and then buy, say, monk fruit or stevia or erythritol or sucralose. And by the way, monk fruit is also called luohan guo, which is the Chinese name for the fruit. One of those natural, artificial, or maybe an artificial sweetener that you know is safe for you. Those are generally considered the safest sweeteners to consume. Now, if you notice you have started consuming one of them and suddenly you're having diarrhea every day, well, try stopping. And if a couple days later to 3 days later, you stop having diarrhea, try a different sweetener. Because for some reason, some people react to certain sweeteners as if it's a laxative, and you go liquid. Not here, down there. Sorry, I've got too much mucus production. So on the days that you need it, you consume it. On the days you don't consume it. Tied in together with your sleep schedule, the number of hours you sleep, the medications being eliminated that are causing problems one way or the other, too much sleep, too much little sleep, waking up feeling tired even though you've slept the right amount. And now you are able to take full advantage of caffeine without becoming addicted, without having problems sleeping. Now, I hope that this video has helped you to change your life. If you are an addict, I have one more thing I want to add. If you have already become addicted to caffeine, here's what you need to do. Now, for this one, this is a little bit more difficult, but it depends on how you look at it, really. If you are drinking energy drinks, what I want you to do is water them down. So, and you're going to do this over a period of days or weeks. It depends on just how bad off you are. You may need to do it over a month. But every day, you're going to take your energy drink or your coffee, you're going to pour it in, and if it's a coffee, you can choose to add more water, or you can choose to use decaf. So, say say if you think that you need 10 days to get off of it, just to use easy numbers here, the first day you're going to do 90% coffee and 10% water or decaf. Now, I know there are health benefits to coffee, so I would suggest doing maybe either you're going to do decaf or you're going to mix in a non-caffeinated tea or like an herbal tea. Or you could take the water and then add spices so it becomes a spiced coffee, like kind of like a mulled spices kind of mix, or 5-spice or cinnamon, pumpkin spice, whatever you want to do. But the second day, you're going to drop it down to, say, 95%. Sorry. The first day is 95%. The second day is 90%. Third day is 85%, 80, 75, 70, and so on. And each day, you're adding more of the substitute that does not have caffeine in it. Please stay away from the sugary stuff. That stuff will mess you up, even worse than caffeine. Okay? And you're going to keep on going down and down and down until you are no longer drinking that caffeinated coffee. Don't throw it away. Don't throw it away. You can still use it on the days only when you need it. Okay? So if you enjoy the flavor of coffee, and I don't know why anybody enjoys the flavor of coffee, because coffee, to me, either tastes like mud or burned stuff, or at best something really bitter. Maybe my tongue isn't sensitive enough. Maybe I just haven't had the right coffee yet. But unflavored, standard coffee, I can barely tolerate medium roast. I like a light roast. And if it's a dark roast, I hate it because it tastes like it's burned or muddy or both. So if you're an addict, you go through this process of slowly, medically they say titrating, but you're going to slowly wean yourself off of that caffeine. Now, if you get to the point where you're starting to have trouble, that means either you're going too fast. Well, yeah, most likely you're going too fast, or something else is going on. So look up the signs of caffeine addiction and caffeine withdrawal. And if you're feeling kind of, I don't know what's going on, look at those two lists and say, what symptom am I having? Is it a symptom of addiction or is it a symptom of withdrawal? And if it's a symptom of withdrawal, slow down a little bit. Maybe give yourself another day at the same level or another 2 days at the same level. Drop it down. If it doesn't feel right, go back up a level. And you keep on doing that until you get to 0. And then you stay off the coffee or energy drinks or whatever it is. And then eventually you will no longer be dependent on or addicted to coffee. It happened to my sister. My niece is still addicted. I've never allowed myself to be addicted. I try to learn all the time, and that's how I can tell these things to you, because I've learned. Now, I know I've mentioned this already in the video, but you need to lower your sugar intake. When I moved from America to Indonesia back in 2001, shortly after 9/11, well, it was an interesting thing. A little side note here. I had, shortly before I left, had a shoulder surgery. And so when I left, my left arm was in a sling. And I got to the airport, I think it was LAX, and they pulled me aside. They said, we're going to do a random check. And I was a little bit confused because they'd already done a random check in Denver, where I was living. So I was like, okay. I didn't care because they weren't going to find anything because there was nothing to find. I knew what was going on. This was October 31st. And so September 11th, the attack had happened, it's September 11th, a little over a month and a half before I left. So they were on heightened alert, and they see this guy going to the country with the most Muslims in it, with a sling. And they're thinking, uh-oh, this guy's a terrorist. So they pull me over. They inspect me in Denver before I get on my first plane. And then when I get into LAX and I'm waiting for my second plane, they check me again randomly. And I knew it wasn't random. I was like, okay, you want to lie to me about it? That's fine. I don't care. Because once you do it twice, it's no longer random. But yeah. So I went to Indonesia and I was eating certain foods that were sweet. And I was complaining to my girlfriend, who later became my wife, these aren't sweet enough. But I continued to eat what was given to me because my wife was a much better chef than I will ever be. I'm sad. It's very sad. I miss her cooking. I miss her. But after a while, one day my mom sent a care package, and in it was some American pudding. And we cooked up one of those packages, and we both complained that it was too sweet. And I used to love it. And it was too sweet. And that is because the food and beverage industries have been over-sweetening stuff to promote addiction to sugar. Sugar is addictive. It's a drug. It's also very sickening and poisonous. So I want to encourage you to slowly decrease the amount of sugar. If you do it slowly enough, you won't notice it. And then when you get a sweet beverage or dessert or whatever from somewhere else that uses the abnormal amount of sugar, very high in other words, you'll be like, oh God, this is gross. I can't eat this. This is way too sweet. But it'll be good for your health. You will increase your lifespan and decrease the amount of medical ailments that you have. So, getting back to the topic here, let's talk about energy drinks. So, first of all, energy drinks are dangerous. Now, how do I know this? Why would I say such a thing, such a blanket statement? I'm not saying all energy drinks, but a lot of them are. They can be dangerous because they have too much caffeine in them. And there are caffeinated drinks out there that can have 200, 300, sometimes even 400 milligrams of caffeine. So you would think that means it's safe. Not necessarily. It depends on what other products or compounds are in it, along with the caffeine. It depends on how sensitive you are to caffeine. Now, when I say caffeine sensitivity and sensitive to caffeine, I'm saying two different things. If it's caffeine sensitivity, it's how much your body reacts to caffeine in terms of like waking you up or making you sleepy. When I say sensitive to caffeine, I'm talking about medical conditions that could be triggered, like a heart attack, by too much caffeine. So, like, there was, I was on last Friday, I was at my food or not my food pantry, but I was at the food pantry that I volunteer at. I get a great deal of joy out of doing that. And at the end of it, I was talking to the assistant director, nice lady, and she was telling me a story about how there had been a young lady from a foreign country who had come through, and she had wanted to take an energy drink. And my friend tried to dissuade her, but she wouldn't listen. And I don't know if she was with her parents or if she was alone, but it turns out she was sensitive to caffeine. She drank that whole can of energy drink, and she had a heart attack and died. That's what I mean by sensitive to caffeine. So if you consume caffeine and you notice that you're skipping beats or your heart is racing or anything like that, that means that you may be sensitive to caffeine in a dangerous way. Also, if you go from no caffeine to 400 milligrams of caffeine, you're probably going to experience nausea. I have found that coffee very strongly causes me nausea. If I consume food prior to consuming the coffee that is chosen to try to mitigate that, I will experience nausea at a much lower level much later on. But if I am on an empty stomach consuming coffee, I will almost immediately feel nausea and I'll feel jittery. If you feel that way, that's a warning sign. Your body's telling you something is going wrong. Okay? Never take coffee on an empty stomach. It's dangerous. And never take large amounts of caffeine, whether it's from coffee or something else. And remember, many teas have caffeine. Chocolate has caffeine. And now they say, chocolate doesn't have enough caffeine in it to bother you. But if you're eating a bar of chocolate, especially dark chocolate, you're getting like 1 cup of coffee's worth of caffeine, give or take. It depends on the particular recipe. Could be more, could be less. So the FDA here in the U.S. says don't consume more than 400 milligrams per day. Now, I think that the FDA is entirely too controlled by the industry. But in the UK, the EFSA says the same thing. But again, it depends on how sensitive you are to caffeine. So please never consume more than 400 milligrams, and don't jump from 0 to 400 or even 200 all at once. Go slowly, okay? And just stick to the 80 to 160 that I'm recommending. So that's one of the dangers that can cause you relatively fast consequences. The second danger is the things they add in. They add in things like CoQ10, amino acids, or EAA aminos. Let's see what else. Taurine, carnitine, and all this other stuff. Now, some of those you may need. And some of them even have B12, like the one I'm drinking today has B12 in it, 1.5 micrograms. So that whole can would give me 60% of the daily value that I need. Unfortunately, how your body will react to those compounds that are added that are supposedly healthful varies. There's always the potential for an overdose. There's also the potential that your body doesn't tolerate that thing well, and you may have an adverse reaction to it. So, in 2021, I was working at a warehouse, and you're saying, why are you working at a warehouse? Well, I wanted to be physically fit, so I took a physical job instead of an intellectual one. And I was talking to a young fella, and he informed me that he used to drink too many energy drinks. I don't know how many, he never specified, but he drank too many energy drinks. And as a consequence, now remember, this is not just the energy drinks, or not just the compounds put into the energy drinks as additives, but also excessive consumption. He explained that he had been over-consuming energy drinks and gotten to the point where his heart was permanently malfunctioning, that he can't even have caffeine at all. I thought, wow. So he was sometimes at work, he was having problems. And I had never heard this before. But then I talked to another person, and another person, and another person. I was at a different company. I was at Amazon, another person. I talked to a person who had so many energy drinks that not only was her heart permanently damaged and she couldn't have caffeine, but she was also experiencing some phase of kidney damage. And I met another person who also had both heart and kidney damage due to consumption or excess consumption of energy drinks. Now, imagine the first person I spoke to when he did this to himself was a teenager. And a lot of teenagers are drinking this crap and hurting themselves. They're getting too many calories, too much sugar, if it's a sugared one. So then they are predisposing themselves to overweight, diabetes, all that kind of stuff. Plus the risks of caffeine addiction, plus the risks of heart damage, kidney damage. And I was at a grocery store not too long ago, and I was walking by the aisle where the energy drinks were, and there were these two young women looking at the energy drinks, trying to decide what they wanted. I was so tempted to warn them. I minded my own business, but I really wanted to go over there and say, hey, I just want to let you know, I know several people who have been permanently damaged by energy drinks, so please just be careful. I kept my mouth shut, although I really didn't want to. And that brings us to children. So for children, the recommendation by the EFSA in the UK is up to 3 milligrams of caffeine per kilogram of body weight for kids all the way up to 18, from 3 to 18. Please don't give it to your little kids. They don't need it. And the FDA doesn't seem to specify for children, but let me just double check and make sure I didn't miss it. Okay, but there is a message, a lot of information on the FDA's website for actually. Well, I don't know if it's actually a lot, but it's useful. And it has a message. Is it okay for kids to consume energy drinks that contain caffeine? Answer. Energy drinks can have more than twice the caffeine and an equal amount of coffee. Now we're talking about volume here, okay? So if you drink a cup of coffee versus a cup of energy drink, you can get more than 160 milligrams in that same volume of liquid. To continue, the American Academy of Pediatrics has stated that there is heightened awareness of the risks of caffeine use, abuse, and even toxicity in children and adolescents. Consult your healthcare provider for advice regarding your child's caffeine consumption. Why would they say that instead of just giving numbers? Well, I mean, I'm skeptical, so I'm going to say that it's industry influence. However, realistically, everybody reacts differently to caffeine. Still, you shouldn't be allowing your children to drink energy drinks. They don't need them unless they're not sleeping right. And you already know how to fix that. Which kinds of foods and beverages contain caffeine? Caffeine can be found naturally in the plants we use to make coffee, tea, and chocolate. It's also found in some plants used as flavorings, such as guarana, or alternative teas popular in South America, such as yerba mate or Ilex paraguayensis and Ilex guayusa. Caffeine may also be added to as an ingredient to food and beverages. If a coffee or tea says decaffeinated, does it mean there's no caffeine? This is a common misconception. Just like when you see lactose-free, you assume that means it's lactose-free. However, the FDA fudges reality and redefines how words work when it comes to labeling. So, if you see free, like lactose-free or caffeine-free, it's a lie. Now, I know this personally because I'm very lactose sensitive, and I have eaten lactose-free ice cream. I've drunk lactose-free milk, and I've ended up with gas and diarrhea. And when a coffee or tea is marked decaffeinated, it is not 100% decaffeinated. Even my sister admitted that to me. There is a low amount. So, in an 8-ounce cup of coffee, typically that's decaffeinated, there are 2 to 15 milligrams of caffeine. So, if you react strongly to caffeine in a negative way, don't drink decaf. If you're one of those people who have been damaged by energy drinks and have a heart sensitivity and or kidney sensitivity to caffeine, don't drink decaf. The FDA has not set a level for children, but the American Academy of Pediatrics discourages the consumption of caffeine and other stimulants by children and adolescents. I do not let my son drink caffeine on a daily basis. Overconsumption of caffeine can cause insomnia, jitters, anxiousness, fast heart rate, upset stomach, nausea, headache, a feeling of unhappiness, or dysphoria. And there's a lot more. So I encourage you to go to the fda.gov/consumers/updates/spilling beans how much caffeine too much, separated by dashes. And 2 is TOO, not TO. And it even gives you a way to cut back on caffeine without it causing unpleasant side effects. Do it gradually, just like I explained. Caffeine withdrawal is unpleasant. It is not dangerous, but it is unpleasant. So if you are giving your children Monster, Bang, True North, or any of those other caffeinated beverages, even the coffees, and you're not making sure that they're limiting their consumption to not every day, and they're not drinking more than, say, 3 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, and yes, that means you're going to have to figure out what they weigh in kilos, then you are putting your children at risk. I'm not accusing you. Please do not misunderstand. I know that you're not doing this intentionally. I know that this is happening because you don't know. And there's so much that we don't know. And there's so much that we don't know that we don't know. When you don't know that you don't know something, it's another way of saying that is you are ignorant of things that you need to know, but you are not aware that they're even a thing that you should know about. So, please, if you have children and they are under the age of 18, be very careful about not letting them have coffee and caffeinated tea every day. Be very careful about not letting them have energy drinks, and explain to them how dangerous energy drinks can be. Now, I haven't even talked about caffeine toxicity. And the toxicity of caffeine is around 1,200 milligrams of caffeine, or 0.15 tablespoons of pure caffeine. And although most people do not consume 1,200 milligrams of caffeine, some people have died of it. So it is a thing. So please, protect your children from energy drinks, from highly caffeinated drinks, and from regular consumption of caffeine. Don't get them started on it. You're not doing them a favor. Now, I've spent a long time talking about caffeinated drinks. In my next video, I will talk about sports drinks. But just to quickly recap what I have laid out for you here. Number 1, you need to figure out a consistent number of hours to sleep every day and a consistent sleep schedule. Number 2, decrease the amount of caffeine you're drinking until you can get it to 0, and then only drink it on days that you actually need it. And then the next one, of course, don't forget, if you have medicines that may be messing you up, and you discuss this with your pharmacist and your doctor, both, not just one, both, then you need to find alternatives, if possible, so that you can go to sleep better, more easily, and so on and so forth. Caffeine can be addictive. It can be toxic if you're slamming huge amounts of it. Like if you have a 300 milligram beverage, in terms of caffeine, I mean, how many do you need to drink to lead to toxic levels? Well, because it takes so long to get it out of your body, it's going to be probably like 4 to 5 cans of it within a short amount of time. Now, since carbonation tends to make it harder for us to chug something, you're probably better off having a carbonated one rather than a non-carbonated one. What I do, and what I prefer to do if I need caffeine, is either to make coffee or make tea or eat chocolate. So these things are all things that you should stop eating or drinking except for early in the morning. Okay? And I will take an unsweetened energy drink or coffee or tea, add some sugar substitutes like lo huan guo or monk's fruit, stevia, sucralose, erythritol. Those are some of the least offensive of the sweeteners. And I will sweeten it with that. That way I have control. Not some company that has an LLC at the end of their company name so they can't be held liable to the fullest extent of the law, which I think is illegal. And please don't let your kids consume energy drinks or overconsume caffeine. And don't let them consume caffeine on a daily basis. Don't let them consume too much sugar. And also, you should not consume too much sugar for your own safety and health. I hope this has helped. If there are any questions, and I'm sorry that this took so long, but if there are any questions, please put them down below.